Ambassador Dae-ho Kim stood at the tall podium in the center of the massive Galactic Council chamber and looked around at the thousands of alien faces staring back at him. The chamber was so big that some of the aliens in the far seats needed special viewing screens to see what was happening at the center. Dae-ho had been to this chamber hundreds of times over the past 37 years, but today felt different. Admiral Bo-Ra Park stood next to him with her military uniform perfectly clean and her face showing no emotion at all. She held a small device in her hand that was recording everything that happened today. Every word and every reaction from the aliens would be saved forever. This was going to be the most important day in galactic history, and she wanted to make sure they had proof of everything. Behind them stood the rest of the human delegation, including Tae-min Lee, who was the military attaché and had been watching alien behavior for months preparing for this moment. He noticed how the tentacled Zephyrian delegate was already changing colors, which meant it was getting nervous. The crystal-like Vorthon representative was making quiet humming sounds that other aliens nearby seemed to find annoying. Jin A.O. was the human trade representative, and she had spent years learning how the galactic economy really worked. She knew exactly how much the other species depended on human traders and human merchants to move goods around the galaxy. Today, they would all find out just how much they needed humans for everything. The youngest member of the delegation was Woo Jin Choi, who was only 28 years old, but had already become an expert on alien politics and alien psychology. He had been the one to suggest that humans should leave the Galactic Council and start doing things their own way. Most of the older diplomats had thought he was crazy, but now they were all here following his plan. Dae-ho cleared his throat and the chamber became quiet. The universal translator system kicked in, and his voice would be heard in over 800 different alien languages all at the same time. Some aliens heard it as musical tones, while others felt it as vibrations in their skin, but they would all understand his words. Members of the Galactic Council. Members of the Galactic, Dae-ho began in a calm voice. After 37 years of membership, the Human Republic has made a decision that we believe is best for our species and ultimately best for the galaxy itself. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the aliens, who normally made constant noise like the insect-like buzzers, had stopped their usual clicking sounds. Everyone knew something big was about to happen. The Human Republic formally withdraws from the Galactic Council effective immediately, Dae-ho announced. We will no longer participate in council votes or abide by council decisions. We thank you for the opportunity to work with you. But we are choosing a different path. For exactly 2 3/10 seconds, the chamber was completely silent. Then chaos erupted, like nothing anyone had ever seen before. The Zephyrian delegate's tentacles turned bright orange, which meant pure panic in their species. It started waving all 6 of its arms and making sounds that the translator could not convert into any known language. The Vorthon representative began emitting high-pitched sounds that made several nearby species cover their ears or whatever they used for hearing. From the upper levels of the chamber came roars and screeches and clicking sounds as hundreds of different species all tried to talk at once. The translator system started sparking and smoking because it could not handle so many different languages being shouted at the same time. The massive slug-like hegemony representative tried to slide down from its elevated platform to get closer to the human delegation, but it was moving so fast that it crashed into several smaller aliens and knocked them over. The floating gas bag aliens started spinning in circles and bumping into each other while making sounds like deflating balloons. In the middle of all this chaos, the human delegation stood perfectly still and calm. They had expected this reaction and had prepared for it. Bo-Ra Park kept recording everything while Tae-min Lee watched the exits to make sure no alien tried to block their departure. Some of the aliens were demanding to know why humans were leaving while others were shouting about treaties and agreements and legal obligations. A few of the more warlike species were making what sounded like threats, but the humans were not worried about that. The truth was that humans had become the most important species in the galaxy without most of the aliens realizing it. When there were disputes between different species, humans were always asked to solve them because they were fair and practical. When pirates attacked trading ships, human warships were sent to stop them. When diseases spread across planets, human doctors found cures. When the Kepler mining wars had threatened to destroy 3 entire star systems, it was human negotiators who found a solution that everyone could accept. When the deadly plague hit, Andromeda 7. It was human scientists who worked day and night to create medicine that saved millions of lives. When space pirates started raiding the Outer Rim territories, it was human naval fleets that patrolled the area and made it safe. The aliens had gotten so used to humans solving their problems that they forgot how much they depended on human help. They thought the council was running smoothly because of their own wisdom and experience, but really it was because humans did most of the actual work. During their 37 years in the council, humans had tried to follow all the rules and procedures, even when those rules made no sense. When humans wanted to start new colonies, they had to wait years for approval from committees that met once every few months. When humans developed new technologies, they were required to share them with species that had never shared anything with humans. When humans tried to suggest better ways to handle emergencies or prevent wars, they were told to be patient and respect galactic traditions. The older species said that humans were too young and too aggressive and needed to learn how things had always been done. But humans had learned, and what they learned was that the galactic system was broken. It took years to make simple decisions. Because every choice had to be approved by dozens of committees filled with aliens who cared more about following procedures than getting results. While they debated and argued, real people were dying and real problems were getting worse. The human delegation had spent months planning this moment. They knew that leaving the council would cause shock and fear among the aliens, but they also knew it was necessary. Humans could not reach their full potential while tied down by a system designed by species who were afraid of change and afraid of human capabilities. As the chaos in the chamber continued, Daiho looked around one last time at the aliens who had been his colleagues for decades. Some of them had been friends or at least friendly acquaintances. He felt a little sad to leave them, but he also felt excited about what humans could accomplish on their own. Wu Jin-choi smiled as he watched the alien reactions. This was exactly what he had predicted would happen. The aliens were panicking because, deep down, they knew that humans had been holding the galaxy together, and now humans were leaving. Soon they would discover just how much they had taken human competence for granted. The human delegation turned and walked toward the exit in perfect formation, like a military unit. Their footsteps echoed in the chamber as aliens continued shouting and arguing behind them. Some aliens tried to follow them, but human security guards blocked the way politely but firmly. As they reached the exit, Daiho turned back once more and saw thousands of alien faces staring at him with expressions of shock and confusion and fear. In 37 years of council membership, he had never seen the aliens look so lost and helpless. The humans walked out of the Galactic Council chamber and did not look back. Phase 1 of their plan was complete, and now the real test would begin. The galaxy was about to learn what life was like without human problem-solving and human competence. Behind them, the chaos continued as aliens argued about what to do next, but none of them had any real answers, because for 37 years they had let humans provide all the answers. Now they were on their own, and they were already discovering that they had no idea how to handle it. 6 standard galactic days after the humans walked out of the council, the first real crisis hit, and it hit hard. The hegemony of Tau Ceti had been planning their invasion of the Proxima systems for over 2 years, but they had always been stopped by council bureaucracy and human mediation. Every time they tried to move their fleets toward Proxima space, the humans would call emergency meetings and find diplomatic solutions that satisfied everyone. The hegemony leaders had gotten frustrated with all the delays and negotiations, but now the humans were gone and there was no one to stop them. The hegemony fleet was massive with over 300 warships of different sizes. The largest ships were kilometer-long dreadnoughts with weapons that could destroy entire cities. The smaller ships were fast attack craft that could strike quickly and disappear before the enemy could respond. It was the biggest military force that had been assembled in over 50 years. The Proxima systems were rich in rare minerals that the hegemony needed for their technology. The native Proximans were a peaceful species that looked like large insects with 4 arms and compound eyes. They had never built a strong military because they had always relied on council protection and human peacekeepers to keep them safe when the hegemony fleet crossed into Proxima space. The local defense forces sent out desperate calls for help. They contacted the Galactic Council Emergency Response Center and waited for the usual procedures to begin. In the past, a human mediator would have been assigned within hours, and human peacekeeping ships would have been dispatched to prevent violence. Instead, they got a message saying that the council was still in emergency session, trying to figure out what to do without human involvement. The emergency response procedures had been designed around human capabilities, and now no one knew how to make them work. The Proximans watched in terror as hundreds of enemy ships moved toward their home worlds. They had small defense fleets, but nothing that could stand against the massive hegemony invasion force. Their leaders sent messages to every friendly species they could think of, but everyone was too busy dealing with their own problems to help. Then something unexpected happened. Captain Hyun Soo Nam of the human vessel Indomitable was patrolling the sector when he received the Proximan distress calls. His ship was part of the 7th Human Defense Fleet, which had been recalled from Council service when humanity withdrew from the galactic government. Officially, they had no authority in Proxima space anymore. Captain Nam looked at the tactical display showing the massive enemy fleet moving toward helpless civilians. He thought about the Council regulations that said only authorized peacekeeping forces could intervene in interstellar conflicts. He thought about the diplomatic protocols that required formal approval from multiple committees before any military action could be taken. Then he thought about the millions of innocent Proximans who were about to be conquered by an aggressive empire that wanted to strip mine their worlds, Commander Sujin Yoon. He said to his second-in-command, "Set course for Proxima 3 at maximum speed, sir." Commander Yoon replied, "We have no legal authority to intervene in this conflict anymore." "We have no legal authority under Council law," Captain Nam agreed, "but we still have moral authority, and that is more important." The Indomitable was not alone. When Captain Nam sent out a general message to all human ships in the area, he got responses from 12 other vessels. Some were military ships like his own, while others were armed merchant vessels or exploration ships with defensive weapons. None of them had any legal right to get involved in the conflict, but all of them were willing to try. The combined human force was much smaller than the hegemony invasion fleet, but they had advantages that the aliens did not understand. During their 37 years in the Council, humans had been quietly developing new technologies and new tactics that they had never been required to share with other species. Human ships were faster and more maneuverable than most alien designs. Human weapons were more accurate and more powerful than anything the Council had ever seen. Human crews were better trained and more experienced in actual combat than aliens who had spent decades relying on diplomacy instead of fighting. When the hegemony fleet reached Proxima 3, they found 13 human ships waiting for them in a defensive formation around the planet. The hegemony commander was a 6-armed insect-like alien named Klekth, who had been planning this invasion for years. He had studied Council military capabilities and knew exactly how long it would take for an official response to be organized. By his calculations, he had at least 20 days before any authorized peacekeeping force could arrive, human vessels. He transmitted using the standard diplomatic channels, "You have no authority in this system. Your species has abandoned galactic law and galactic responsibility. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences," Captain Nam responded from his position on the bridge of the Indomitable, with Commander Yoon standing beside him monitoring all. "Communications, hegemony fleet," Captain Nam said in a calm voice. "You are in violation of the Proxima Accords and the Non-Aggression Treaty of 2387. You have 30 minutes to withdraw your forces, or we will take action to protect the civilians in this system." Commander Klekth made a sound that his translator converted into laughter. 13 small ships against 300 warships, he clicked. "You humans have lost your minds along with your legal standing. We will destroy you, and then proceed with our lawful conquest of this system." 29 minutes and 30 seconds. Captain Nam replied. The hegemony commander cut the communication and ordered his fleet to prepare for battle. He had numerical superiority of more than 20 to 1, and his ships carried the latest Council-approved weapons and defenses. The humans might be brave, but they were also outnumbered and outgunned. What Commander Kalakath did not know was that human military technology had advanced far beyond anything the Council had seen, while other species had been content to follow. Traditional designs and established patterns, humans had been experimenting with revolutionary new approaches to space warfare. The human ships carried weapons that could disable enemy vessels without destroying them. They had defensive systems that could deflect or absorb incoming attacks. Their sensors could track multiple targets at once and coordinate complex battle plans in real time. When the battle began, it was over in less than 20 minutes. The hegemony. Ships found themselves unable to lock onto the fast-moving human vessels. Their weapons could not penetrate the advanced human shields. Their communications were jammed by human electronic warfare systems they had never encountered before. One by one, the massive hegemony dreadnoughts found their weapons disabled and their engines shut down. The smaller attack craft were caught by some kind of energy net that held them motionless in space. Within minutes, the entire invasion fleet was helpless and drifting. Commander Kluckth stared at his tactical display in complete shock. His massive fleet had been defeated by 13 human ships without a single human casualty and without any of his own ships being destroyed. The humans had simply made his entire force powerless to continue fighting. "Hegemony Fleet," came Captain Nam's voice over the communication system. "Your weapons and engines will be restored once you withdraw from Proxima Space and return to your own territory. Any attempt to return will result in the permanent disabling of your vessels." The defeated invasion fleet began the long journey home, while the Proximans celebrated their unexpected rescue. News of the battle spread quickly across the galaxy as other species tried to understand how 13 human ships had defeated a massive enemy force so easily. On the Council world of Nexus Prime, the remaining alien leaders were meeting in emergency session, trying to figure out what to do about the growing crisis. Without human mediation and human peacekeeping, the galaxy was starting to fall apart. Chancellor Vorthak of the Reptilian Saurian Empire was trying to maintain order in a council chamber that was much emptier than usual. Many species had stopped sending representatives because they were dealing with problems in their own territories. "The trade routes are failing," reported Queen Zixth of the Insectoid Hive Confederation. "Human merchant fleets were handling over 60% of interstellar commerce. Without them, our economies are beginning to collapse." Master Engineer Gralvin of the Silicon-based Crystalline Union added more bad news. All major construction projects have stopped. The crystal being announced, the terraforming operation on New Kepler was managed by humans. The stellar engineering project in the Vega system was led by human scientists. The Great Space Elevator being built on Titan III was designed and supervised by human engineers. Without them, nothing is getting done. The worst news came from Sage Yilmora of the Empathic Etherian Collective, who had been monitoring communications across the galaxy. "I have been sensing growing anger and fear throughout known space," the ethereal being reported. "In the past week, 17 separate conflicts have erupted between species that had peaceful relations for decades. Old territorial disputes are resurging and ancient grudges are being remembered. Without human peacekeepers and mediators, war is spreading." Chancellor Vorthak looked around the half-empty chamber and felt something he had never experienced before in his long political career. 2 months after the humans walked out of the Galactic Council, the galaxy was burning with conflicts that seemed to grow worse every day. General Minho Kang stood on the observation deck of the massive human battleship Resilience and watched the evacuation of Kepler Station through the thick, transparent aluminum windows. The trading station had once been the jewel of the mid-rim territories and a symbol of successful cooperation between different species. Now it was being abandoned as 3 separate alien factions prepared to fight over who would control it. The station was enormous, with docking bays that could handle thousands of ships at once and living areas that housed over 2 million beings from dozens of different species. Markets and shops and restaurants filled entire levels, while massive cargo holds stored goods from across the galaxy. It had taken 15 years to build and had been considered one of the great achievements of galactic civilization. Now it would probably be destroyed in the fighting that was about to begin, sir, said Lieutenant Haiwan Jung from her position at the communications console. "Incoming transmission from the Galactic Council. Chancellor Vorthak wants to speak with you personally." General Kang did not turn away from the window where he was watching refugee ships fleeing the station. "Let me guess what he wants," the general said in a tired voice. "The Council wants us to mediate the dispute and prevent the battle. They want human peacekeepers to solve another problem that they created through their own incompetence." "Actually, sir," Lieutenant Jung replied, "he is not asking. The Chancellor is demanding that humanity intervene. He says we have a moral obligation to prevent civilian casualties." General Kang let out a laugh that held no humor at all. Moral obligation, he repeated. Tell me, Lieutenant, what was our moral obligation when the Council spent 5 years debating whether humans deserved full voting? Rights? What was our obligation when they restricted our colonization efforts because other species complained that we were expanding too quickly? He finally turned away from the window and looked at his young communications officer. What was our moral obligation when they refused to let us upgrade their defensive systems because they were afraid human technology would give us too much influence? They created this mess with their bureaucracy and their fear of human success. Now they want us to clean it up. On Earth, President Yan Su-bei was meeting with her cabinet in the deep underground command center that had not been used since the final war between humans and artificial intelligences decades earlier. The room was filled with holographic displays showing the deteriorating situation across the galaxy. Red indicators marked active conflicts, while yellow warnings showed areas where fighting was likely to begin soon. The situation is becoming impossible to ignore, said Foreign Minister Junho Lim as he studied the tactical displays. Civilian casualties are mounting daily and refugee flows are overwhelming the systems that are still stable. President Bei nodded grimly as she reviewed the latest reports. In just 2 months, the galaxy had fallen apart faster than anyone had predicted. Without human mediation, ancient enemies were settling old scores. Without human peacekeepers, aggressive species were seizing territory from their weaker neighbors. Without human merchants and traders, entire economic systems were collapsing. Director Kyung-mi Park. The president said to the head of human relief operations, "What is the current status of our humanitarian efforts?" Director Park brought up her own set of displays showing human rescue and relief operations across the galaxy. "We have evacuated over 2 million civilians from active war zones," she reported. "Our medical ships are treating casualties in 17 different systems, and we have established refugee camps on 14 neutral worlds. All of this is being done without council authorization and without any support from alien governments." Defense Minister Dongwook Song leaned forward with a grim expression. "The irony is incredible," he said. "We are providing more humanitarian aid now than we ever did as council members. But because we are operating independently instead of through their bureaucratic system, we can actually save lives instead of filling out paperwork." The president studied the data streams showing human ships racing to help civilians, while council committees were still debating what form of response might be appropriate. Human doctors were treating alien casualties while council health officials were arguing about jurisdiction and proper procedures. Human engineers were repairing damaged infrastructure while council technical experts were forming committees to study the problems. "How are the other species reacting to our independent operations?" President Bei asked. "Mixed responses," replied Intelligence Director Seijin Cho. "The civilians we are helping are grateful, but many alien governments are complaining that we are violating their sovereignty by operating in their space without permission." "Let me understand this correctly," the president said slowly. "They are complaining because we are saving lives without asking their permission first." "That is correct, Madam President. Several species have filed formal protests with what remains of the council claiming that humanitarian operations are illegal under galactic law." President Bei felt the same grim satisfaction that had been growing in her mind for weeks. For 37 years, humanity had tried to work within a system that had never been designed for them. They had accepted limitations and restrictions imposed by species who feared what humans might accomplish if given freedom to act. The Council had been created by old established civilizations that valued stability and tradition above all else. They had developed elaborate procedures and complex bureaucracies designed to prevent any single species from gaining too much power or influence. The system worked well for maintaining the status quo, but it was terrible at handling emergencies or solving actual problems. Humans were different. They were young and energetic and practical. When they saw problems, they wanted to fix them immediately, not spend years debating the proper approach. When they developed new technologies, they wanted to use them to help people, not lock them away. In committees for safety studies, the alien species had spent decades trying to slow humans down and make them conform to galactic traditions. They had created rules specifically designed to limit human expansion and human influence. They had convinced themselves that humans were too aggressive and too unpredictable to be trusted with real authority. Now the galaxy was learning what happened when human competence was removed from the equation. What about our own operations? President Bay asked. Are we having any problems maintaining our independence? None at all, replied Defense Minister Song. Our fleets are operating at full efficiency, without council oversight. Our colonies are expanding faster than ever, without having to wait for approval from alien committees. Our trade networks are handling more commerce than the entire council managed in its final years. The truth was that humanity had been held back far more than most humans had realized. Council regulations had prevented them from using their best technologies. Council procedures had slowed down their decision-making processes. Council politics had forced them to compromise on solutions that they knew were suboptimal free from those constraints. Humans were accomplishing things that amazed even themselves. New colonies were being established in months instead of years. Trade disputes were being resolved in days instead of decades. Military conflicts were being ended through superior force and fair negotiations instead of endless committee meetings. There is something else, said Director Park quietly. We are getting requests for help from individual alien worlds that are bypassing their own governments entirely. Local leaders who are dealing with immediate crises are asking for direct human assistance. How many requests? President Bay asked. Over 300 in the past week alone. Planetary governors who need emergency medical supplies. City mayors who want human engineers to repair damaged infrastructure. Military commanders who want human advisors to help plan defensive strategies. The president nodded slowly as she considered the implications. The formal Galactic Council might be condemning human actions, but ordinary aliens who needed help were turning to humans because they knew humans would actually provide effective assistance. What about the council itself? She asked. Are they showing any signs of adapting to the new reality? Foreign Minister Lim shook his head. They are completely paralyzed. Without human mediation, they cannot resolve even simple disputes between member species. 3 more civilizations announced their withdrawal from the council this week because they got tired of waiting for action on critical issues. How many members do they have left? Less than 300 out of the original 800. Most of the departing species are not joining any other organization. They are simply declaring independence and trying to handle their own affairs. President Bay walked to the large display showing the entire galaxy with different colors, indicating political affiliations and conflict zones. Most of the map was now colored red or yellow, indicating active warfare or high tension. The small areas of green showing stable, peaceful regions were almost all systems that had direct relationships with human organizations. We need to make a decision, she said finally. We can continue providing humanitarian aid while the galaxy tears itself apart, or we can take a more active role in creating stability. 6 months after humanity left the Galactic Council, Ambassador Kel Nara of the Aquatic Tideborn found herself in a position she had never imagined possible. She was leading a council delegation to Earth to beg the humans to return. The Tideborn were proud beings who lived in the deep oceans of their home world and had never asked anyone for help in their entire history as a spacefaring species. But desperate times had forced them to swallow their pride and join the unprecedented mission to human space. Prime Counselor Thexari of the hive-minded Convergence traveled with her, along with representatives from 43 other species. It was the largest diplomatic delegation ever assembled, and they were all coming to Earth as supplicants rather than equals. The journey itself had been humiliating. Council ships were no longer welcome in many systems because of the chaos that had spread across the galaxy. They had been forced to take long detours around conflict zones, and some of their escort vessels had been attacked by pirates who knew the Council could no longer protect itself. When they finally reached Earth's solar system, they found orbital defenses that were more sophisticated than anything in Council space. Massive battle stations surrounded the planet, while patrol fleets of advanced human warships monitored every approach vector. The defenses were polite, but absolutely thorough in scanning the alien vessels and their occupants, Admiral Sang Hyun. Choi met them at Luna Station with a full honor guard, but the ceremony felt more like a military inspection than a diplomatic welcome. The human admiral was perfectly courteous, but there was no mistaking the fact that the aliens were entering human territory as guests who could be refused entry at any time. Honored delegates, Admiral Choi said, as he led them through the pristine corridors of the space station. President Bay will meet with you shortly. While we are waiting, perhaps you would like to review some recent statistics about human operations in galactic space. The holographic display that appeared in the conference room was devastating in its simple clarity. While the council had been paralyzed by procedural debates and committee meetings, human forces had prevented 14 separate genocides and stopped 23 wars through direct intervention. Human medical teams had saved over 50 million lives across the galaxy, while council health organizations were still forming committees to study the various crises. Human engineers had completed major infrastructure projects in dozens of systems, while council technical experts were debating safety regulations and environmental impact studies. Human merchants had kept trade flowing between systems that would otherwise have been completely cut off from galactic commerce. The most shocking statistic was the comparison of response times. When emergencies occurred, human forces typically arrived within hours or days to provide assistance. Council emergency response procedures required an average of 47 days just to approve sending help and additional weeks to actually deploy resources. Ambassador Kelnara studied the data with growing despair. Her own people had always prided themselves on their efficiency and practical approach to problems, but even the Tideborn could not match human capabilities when it came to getting things done quickly and effectively. When President Bay finally entered the conference room, she was accompanied by General Yuri Nam and scientific advisor Taeho Park. The aliens had expected to be meeting with desperate humans who had realized their mistake in leaving the council. Instead, they found themselves facing leaders who appeared calm and confident and completely in control. Madam President, Ambassador. Kelnara began with her translated voice carrying the formal diplomatic tones she had been trained to use. The galaxy faces unprecedented chaos and instability. The Council formally requests that humanity reconsider its position and return to galactic governance. Cultural Attaché So Young. Kim, who was standing behind the president, responded before President Bay could speak. Requests? She asked with raised eyebrows. I was under the impression this was a demand. Chancellor Vorthak's last message was quite clear about humanity's obligations to solve galactic problems. Prime Counselor Thexari's collective consciousness buzzed with frustration as thousands of individual minds tried to formulate a response. You must understand the situation is critical. The hive mind finally managed to say, the Vegan Consortium has completely collapsed. The Rim Wars have spread to over 40 systems. Interstellar trade has decreased by 70%. Billions of beings across the galaxy are suffering. President Bay studied the aliens with the same calm expression she might use when examining scientific data. She had been briefed on every detail of the galactic crisis, and she knew exactly how desperate the Council had become. During our Council membership, she said slowly, humanity proposed early intervention protocols that would have prevented most of these conflicts. We suggested expanded peacekeeping forces and streamlined humanitarian response procedures. What was the Council's response to these proposals? The silence in the room stretched uncomfortably as none of the aliens wanted to answer. Secretary of State Yunji Lee continued when no alien spoke up. The response was that our proposals were premature and aggressive and not in keeping with galactic traditions. I believe the exact phrase used by several council members was that humans needed to learn patience and respect for established procedures. We made mistakes, admitted Sage Yilmora, the empathic Etherian whose translated voice carried genuine remorse. We were afraid of human capabilities and human ambitions. Your rapid advancement and military efficiency frightened the established powers in the galaxy. And now? President Bay asked. Now we are terrified of existing without you. The brutal honesty of that statement hung in the air like a physical presence. For the first time in galactic history, the older species were admitting that they needed the younger humans more than humans needed them. Let me make sure I understand the situation correctly, President Bay said, as she walked to the large display. Showing current galactic conditions, for 37 years, humanity tried to work within your system. We followed your procedures and respected your traditions, even when we knew there were better ways to handle problems. She gestured to the red zones on the display, indicating active conflicts. When we suggested reforms that would have prevented these crises, you told us we were too young and too aggressive to understand galactic politics. You created regulations specifically designed to limit human expansion and human influence because you were afraid of what we might accomplish. The alien delegates shifted uncomfortably in their specially designed seats as President Bay continued. Now, Your system has collapsed without human support, and you want us to come back and fix the problems you created. But you want us to do this while still operating under the same limitations and restrictions that prevented us from helping effectively in the first place. We would be willing to discuss modifications to council procedures, Chancellor Vorthak said desperately through his translator. Perhaps humans could be given expanded authority in certain areas. President Bay smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. Chancellor, you still do not understand the situation. Humanity does not want expanded authority within your system. We want complete independence from your system. She activated another display showing human operations across the galaxy. In 6 months of independent operations, we have accomplished more than the Council managed in 6 years. Our colonies are thriving without Council oversight. Our trade networks are more efficient than anything the galaxy has ever seen. Our military forces can respond to crises immediately instead of waiting for committee approval. But what about galactic unity? Asked Ambassador Kelnara. What about the dream of all species working together in harmony? Unity without competence is worthless, replied General Nam. Harmony without effectiveness helps no one. The Council's dream of cooperation was beautiful, but it was built on a foundation of bureaucratic paralysis. Scientific Advisor Park added his own perspective. In our independent research programs, we have made more scientific breakthroughs in 6 months than we managed in 6 years under Council oversight. When we wanted to test new technologies, we no longer need approval from committees that do not understand the science involved. The alien delegates looked at each other with growing despair. They had come to Earth expecting to negotiate humanity's return to the Council. Instead, they were discovering that humans had no interest in returning to a system that had held them back. What do you want from us? Prime Counselor Thexari asked, with thousands of individual minds speaking in unison. Nothing. President Bay replied simply, we want nothing from the Council because the Council has nothing we need. You have already given us the greatest gift possible by forcing us to discover what we can accomplish on our own. The silence that followed was complete and devastating. However, the President continued, we are not completely unreasonable. Humanity is willing to consider establishing formal diplomatic relations with individual species or groups of species who are interested in practical cooperation rather than bureaucratic procedures. She gestured to her staff, who began distributing documents. To the alien delegates. The Terran Compact offers an alternative to failed Council governance. Any world or system can join by simple declaration. No committees, no lengthy approval processes, no political games. 1 year after the humans walked out of the Galactic Council, the galaxy had been completely transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. Captain Ji-Hoon Park guided his merchant vessel Prosperity through the busy traffic lanes approaching New Geneva Station, which had become the largest trading hub in known space. The massive space station had been built in just 8 months in what had previously been empty space in the Centauri B system. Now it buzzed with constant activity as representatives from over 200 different species conducted business. Under human protection and regulation, it is remarkable, said economist Changmin Lee as he watched the activity through the observation windows of the merchant ship. We are handling more interstellar commerce here than the entire Council managed during their final decade of operation. The difference was simple and obvious to anyone who cared to look. Instead of requiring 17 different committees to approve a simple shipping manifest, human administrators could process trade agreements in hours instead of months. Instead of endless debates about tariffs and regulations, human economists had created a system based on practical needs and mutual benefit. Docking at New Geneva Station took less than 10 minutes compared to the hours or even days required at Council facilities. Captain Park's cargo was inspected by efficient human customs officers who understood that the purpose of trade regulation was to facilitate commerce rather than prevent it. His paperwork was processed by computer systems that had been designed for speed and accuracy rather than bureaucratic complexity. On the trading floors, representatives from species that had been enemies for centuries worked side by side under human oversight. The key to success was that humans did not care about ancient grudges or traditional rivalries. They cared about results, and they had the military power to enforce fair dealing among all participants. The hegemony of Tau Ceti, which had attempted to invade Proxima Space a year earlier, was now one of the most active traders at New Geneva Station. Their minerals and manufactured goods were highly valued by other species, and human trade regulations ensured that they received fair prices for their products. In return, they had to follow human rules about peaceful conduct and honest dealing on. The former Council world of Nexus Prime, what remained of the Galactic Council, met in emergency session in a chamber that was now less than one-third full. What had once been a body representing 800 different species now contained fewer than 300 members. The rest had either collapsed entirely or joined the growing number of independent systems that contracted directly with human lead. Organization's Chancellor Vorthak of the Saurian Empire looked around the half-empty chamber and tried to maintain some dignity in the face of complete failure. His own species was considering withdrawal from the Council because they could no longer afford the cost of maintaining a representative government that accomplished nothing. The Human Republic has agreed to establish formal diplomatic relations with the Council, he announced to the sparse audience, though the words felt bitter in his mouth. They have presented us with terms for a basic non-aggression agreement. The terms were not negotiable, and everyone in the chamber knew it. Humans would maintain complete independence from Council authority. Human military forces would answer to no galactic government. Human economic policies would be determined solely by human leadership. In exchange, humans would refrain from actively undermining what remained of Council operations. It was not a partnership or an alliance. It was a recognition that humans had become the dominant power in the galaxy, and the Council was now a minor regional organization that existed only because humans allowed it to continue. Master Engineer Gralvin of the Crystalline Union raised one of his crystal appendages to speak. "What about the species that have joined the Terran Compact?" he asked. "Are they still considered members of the galactic community?" Chancellor Vorthak checked his datapad before responding. Over 400 star systems have now joined the Terran Compact, including some of our former core members. They operate under human protection and human trade regulations. For practical purposes, they are no longer part of Council jurisdiction. The numbers were devastating. In just 1 year, humans had attracted more members to their new organization than the Council had managed to keep. Species that had been loyal Council members for centuries had abandoned the old system in favor of human competence and efficiency. Queen Zixth of the Insectoid Hive Confederation spoke up from her elevated platform. "My species has been monitoring human activities across the galaxy. Their success rate in conflict resolution is over 90%. Their trade networks are expanding into regions we never successfully reached. Their technology-sharing programs have advanced member species by decades in just months." She paused to let the implications sink in before continuing. "The humans have not conquered the galaxy through military force. They have conquered it by being better at everything we tried to do." On Terra Station, which served as the diplomatic center for the Terran Compact ambassador, Dae-Ho Kim sat across a conference table from a new delegation of Council representatives. But the dynamics of the meeting were completely different from the desperate pleas of 6 months earlier. The humans were no longer trying to negotiate their return to a broken system. Instead, they were dictating the terms under which they would interact with what remained of the old galactic order. "The Terran Compact is not a replacement for the Galactic Council," Ambassador Kim explained patiently. "It is an alternative for species that want practical cooperation instead of bureaucratic procedures. Council members are welcome to maintain their traditional system if they prefer it." Fleet Admiral Bo-Ra Park, who had witnessed the original walkout a year earlier, added her perspective. "Human forces will continue to maintain peace and stability in compact space and in systems that request our assistance. We will continue to provide humanitarian aid and disaster relief anywhere it is needed, but we do so as an independent power, not as servants of any galactic authority." The alien delegates nodded eagerly because they had learned the hard truth that competence was far more valuable than they had ever imagined. During their centuries of galactic civilization, they had assumed that all spacefaring species were roughly equal in capability, with success or failure determined mainly by luck or resources. The human experience had shattered that comfortable assumption. Humans were not lucky or unusually well equipped. They were simply better at organizing themselves and solving problems than the species that had dominated the galaxy for thousands of years. President Yonsu Bey addressed the combined human and alien press corps from the beautiful gardens of New Seoul, which had become Earth's diplomatic quarter. Behind her, the gleaming towers of the most advanced city in the galaxy rose into the sky, while alien diplomats and trade representatives walked the streets alongside human citizens. The Galactic Council was built on the assumption that all species were equal in capability, she said to the assembled reporters. This was a beautiful ideal, but ideals do not prevent wars or negotiate trade agreements or save lives from disasters. Competence does these things, and competence is not equally distributed among all species. She gestured to the bustling activity visible through the garden's transparent walls. The galaxy is learning that freedom and responsibility go together. We walked away from a system that stifled both human potential and galactic progress. Now we offer something better, which is partnership based on results rather than committees based on procedures. Behind her Director of Galactic Affairs, Min Jun Oh, was simultaneously managing communications with 47 different sector governments, all of whom had bypassed the Council entirely to work directly with human administrators. His staff processed more diplomatic business in a single day than the Council had managed in months. As President Bay spoke, human ships were patrolling trade, routes that were safer than they had been in centuries. Human mediators were resolving disputes that might once have escalated into system-wide wars. Human engineers were completing infrastructure projects that the Council had been debating for decades without ever beginning actual construction. Transformation was visible everywhere. Systems that had joined the Terran Compact were experiencing unprecedented prosperity and stability. Trade was flowing more efficiently than ever before. Conflicts were being resolved quickly and fairly. Scientific research was advancing at rates that amazed even human scientists. Species that had remained loyal to the Council were falling further behind every month. Their economies were stagnating while Compact members thrived. Their conflicts dragged on unresolved while human mediators settled disputes in days or weeks. Their infrastructure projects remained stalled in committee while human engineers built new wonders across the galaxy. We did not set out to conquer the galaxy. President Bay concluded her address. We simply wanted the freedom to reach our full potential as a species. But in seeking that freedom, we discovered something that the galaxy had forgotten. Leadership is not about having the most elaborate procedures or the oldest traditions. Leadership is about getting results. The press conference ended, but the message had been delivered to every inhabited system in known space. The old galaxy was gone forever, replaced by something that actually worked.